Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
History remembers moments of extraordinary strength, skill, and determination. True greatness is forged by those who fulfill their destiny.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest and greatest episode of Unfiltered on Past the Wire TV with Michael Wilson, who's back from the Keeneland sale, myself, John Stettin, in the midst of a looming possible Category 5 hurricane, but we've got time to do our show, all safe and secure for now. Let's hope it stays that way, my man.
What you guys don't know is John's actually on a lifeboat, and he's got, the background was Zoom just to make it feel like he's in his house, but he is literally floating in the ocean as we record this episode.
Right. With life rafts
dedication.
all around me. We may fast forward a few hours, and that might not be so far from the truth. So you never know with these things.
We'll go from horse racing to dolphin racing. We'll cover that here shortly.
Absolutely. The topic of the show today, I think, is a very interesting topic, and I'll go as far as to say I also think it's a misunderstood topic because everybody is criticizing it, and I understand why. But I think a lot of the people criticizing it do not understand or are not aware of the rationale behind it. And we'll talk about that. And that doesn't mean that it's right or that they're going to agree with it. But I think before you make a decision, you have to at least know the rationale that was applied to instituting the rule. And the rule is regarding crops, strikes by riders, and ultimately whether or not, and at this point they are, owners should be penalized for riders violating the crop rule. And that's happening, okay? And we know that it rolled out under horrible circumstances when stewards made a mistake and incorrectly applied the rule several weeks ago at this point. But even when applied correctly, a lot of owners, a lot of people in the game are stating that it's asinine, it's ridiculous, and owners should in no way be penalized for a rider violating a rule. So it's a hot topic. It's an interesting topic. People have spoken about it before. Like I said, most people are absolutely against it. I've got a little bit of a different take on it we'll get into, but what are your initial thoughts about it, Michael? And you've got a different perspective because you've been involved in owning, you've been involved in training, you're involved now in putting together partnerships and syndicates and whatnot. So I'm sure you feel a little bit of the pain of an owner who can lose a purse, lose a significant amount of money, which some owners have, as a result of something a rider did that you may have had absolutely nothing to do with.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, and you mentioned that, right? And it's kind of interesting on multiple fronts of my background as once a trainer and then now on the management and ownership side. I remember early on, I was always very good at communicating with my clients, but now that I'm on the other side and I do go to the barn a lot and see these horses, but now I'm like, you need to communicate with me more, right? Like I don't get enough communication. So it's interesting seeing this from both sides as well on a topic of, because as we manage horses, I try and look at, what's the horse that we have? What are our options in terms of conditions that we have left? How can we maximize the earnings of this horse? while also making sure this horse is sound and healthy and giving them all the care that they need to stay in top racing shape. So as I manage budgets, I'm trying to understand, okay, well, if we go to this race, you know, we can maybe win and pick up a purse there, or we could run second or third here. And I'm looking at how we budget things for the year for each horse. And not that there's strict budgets, but I try and look at it of, with each client that comes to me, they come to me and I ask them a specific three very interesting questions. A, why do you want to own racehorses? B, what are your goals with owning racehorses? And C, what's your budget? Okay. And then based off those three questions, I formulate plans and strategies to help these owners, A, achieve their goals, and then B, make sure we stay within the budgets on everything that we spend for them.
Right.
So when you're dealing with situations, and I remember as a trainer, and this is a big reason why I don't train anymore, is there's so many variables to earning your living as a trainer, right? Horse wakes up, coughs, scratched. You've lost the potential income. Jock now in these types of situations hits a horse one too many times, purse is lost. It also costs not just the jock, but it costs the trainer and it costs the owner, right? So what I've always known, and I have a lot of respect for jockeys, but I also understand in the heat of battle, sometimes thinking, you know, you go into just muscle memory, right? And to this point in time, in Europe, it's different. They've dealt with whip rules. They understand how many times they can hit. I used to see it. I remember when I was in Dubai on the Flying Start, Christophe Soumillon came over and kept violating the whip rule and was constantly in the steward's office, right? As you adjust to new circuits and as you adjust to new rules, there are going to be issues. And I completely understand how HISA drafted their rules. They were trying to make sure that when owners employed trainers, and then also, you know, owners don't really employ jockeys. The trainer picks the jockey, and it's a question of everybody agreeing on it. But they wanted to make sure that there weren't owners also trying to cheat by pushing trainers and jockeys to do things they weren't supposed to do. So they wanted to make sure the ultimate insurer of the horse was the owner, and that the owner would cost dearly if anybody in that chain of command broke the rules. Completely.
That's 100% correct, because, you know, Lisa Lazarus, who you know is the head of HISA, she was
Right.
gracious enough to give me a one-on-one interview on our show on Past the Wire TV. And, you know, I specifically asked her about that rule because she had previously said some of the rules were going to be adjusted, amended, or tweaked as they went along. So I brought that one up because there was such an uproar about it. And she was very forthright. And she said, that's not one of the ones that's on the radar to be changed. And she explained to me why. When they did their due diligence in drafting their rules, okay, one of the things that they repeatedly heard, which was basically what you said, was that there were a lot of owners, because of the sizes of a lot of purses, that were telling riders, don't worry about those rules, use the whip, use the crop, win the race, I'll pay the fine.
Right.
Okay. So that rule was implemented, and a lot of people don't understand this because everyone who talks about how asinine it is never mentions why it was implemented. But it was implemented because their due diligence indicated that there were a significant amount of owners who were taking the position, hey, I'll pay the fine, I'll win the purse, don't worry about it, win the race, and there you have it. So that rule was implemented, and they may change their mind and tweak it anyway now with all the heat that they're getting over it. That I don't know. But at the time, she did say that was not on the agenda because it was deliberately designed to penalize owners, like it or not. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree at this point. We'll get to that maybe. But it was deliberately designed, as you said, to police owners and enforce owners and possibly even trainers from encouraging a rider to violate the rule and not worry about the fine. So that's why the fines are steep and directed at the owners, which is what you're alluding to. And she outright and said it on the show. So I think before you make a decision about that rule, okay, and I'm not talking to you specifically, I'm talking to people who are deciding, you should at least know the rationale and the mindset behind implementing it. Because I will tell you this, their intelligence, for lack of a better term, or their intel is not wrong. I have heard many owners before the rule was implemented, and I don't even talk to that many owners, but I've heard many say exactly that.
Right.
You know, some have said it publicly,
Right.
which is completely ridiculous, but that's just it,
Well, and I've always thought in our sport, and I was kind of happy with how strict and how severe punishments were going to be when it came to HISA. And I think that was the biggest thing in our sport the entire time. And not saying that I agree specifically with this rule. I understand why it was built the way it was.
Right.
But when you look at it, a lot of times the penalty didn't fit the crime in our sport. It was literally like a slap on the wrist for most things, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, you lost $1,000, 2,000, 3,000. You got to sit out 2-3 days.
Right.
You're a top jock who's already earning, X amount per year. It's literally nothing, which is why, in my opinion, over the years, rule breaking was rampant because the rules weren't stiff enough to make people think twice. Now it's stiff to where actually it's going to stick, right? Riders are going to get punished. Owners are going to get punished. Trainers are going to get punished. Do I understand from the ownership side how tough it is to actually stay in this game in terms of, vet costs are going up, shipping costs are going up. It was interesting. I remember we shipped a horse, it was Kiss-A-Lot. We shipped Kiss-A-Lot from Kentucky to New York. And I remember when I trained, box stall to New York typically used to range around $1,600, right? $1,700 bucks. Now it's $2,500 plus extra fees for gas, plus this, and this. So the costs continue to rise. And it's not just on the ownership side, it's on the training side too. I mean, I have conversations with trainers every day. The cost to run a training stable continues to rise as well. So as it gets, trainers are going to have to bring up their day rates, which is also going to eat into owners and what they can potentially make with these horses. And there is a misnomer in this game. Not every owner just has a ton of money just to throw in the trash and forget about it, right? Otherwise, the game won't survive. So I do understand, because I have seen in multiple instances, John, as you've said, there are owners who are playing the game a specific way, and they employ specific people who they know will bend the rules to help them be successful in racing. And to me, I always thought that was wrong. So I'm glad that HISA kind of drafted rules to knock out those types of people, to then make it, and in the short term, it is going to be frustrating. There are going to be a lot of things that pop up. I can guarantee you, if one of the horses with Daily Double Racing or any of our other clients runs and it gets taken down and penalized and they lose the purse because a jock hit it one too many times, I'm going to be livid. Okay, livid.
Right.
But we will get rid of a lot of the bad players in our game, which is what needed to happen. The sport is rampant with people that want to not play the game correctly and fairly. And we have to get rid of those people to bring the whole tide up, to lift all ships.
Salute. I agree 100%. So many people think that because I take positions about fair treatment and treating people across the board in the same way, they think that somehow I don't care about horses, or I'm taking up for people that do the wrong thing, which could not be further from the actual truth. Okay, I am to the extreme when it comes to horses. Okay, I believe in zero tolerance. All right, and I think you're spot on when you say sometimes we have to bite the bullet, so to speak, for the betterment of the sport long term. Okay, and the trainers that are getting penalized and losing money, which I feel for them, okay, especially if they're in the group that is not encouraging that, and they are trying to play by the rules, but they got caught up by an over-aggressive or overzealous jockey, or a jockey that simply, passion, memory recall, like muscle recall, like you said, violated a rule, boom, and the owner got flagged, okay? And it hurts his pocket, and maybe it's somebody who is not one of these mega owners with an unlimited well to draw from. I feel for that. I do, but we got to realize, okay, that participating in this sport is not a right, it's a privilege. Okay?
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't realize that. So if you're an owner and you've got limited means, and this is not a popular comment, but we spoke about a lot of things on this show that other people don't speak about. One of the things we spoke about was some kind of financial responsibility requirement to even be an owner. People may think that's a ridiculous thing, but when it comes to taking care of animals, I don't think it's ridiculous to make sure that people have the means with which to do it before they endeavor into it. So, you know, I'm all for some kind of training class. I think owners, you know how trainers have to take a test to get a license? I think owners should have to take a test to get a license and go through a little bit more screening than saying, Mike, here's 50,000, buy me a horse. Here's 200,000, buy me a horse. You know, now
I agree.
Now I'm an owner and I got no idea what that entails. I don't know what vet bills mean. I don't know what shipping costs are. I don't know what aftercare is. I don't know what happens to my horse if he's injured and can't run for a year. Do I still own him? Do I still pay? But I find this out after I give you the 200 to buy me the horse. That's ridiculous. That's a bad system. Okay.
Oh, 100%.
You know, so I'm all for that, you know, and I'll give you an extreme example, which I like to use, and it's a touchy subject, but anybody who's lost a loved one, and which I have not, thank God, to a drunk driver will maybe understand where I'm coming from, okay? Drunk driving is a problem, okay? And you don't feel it until it hits you, okay? And there are many people that casually drive drinking and think, well, I only had a few, I'm okay, okay? And there are many people that have actually killed people who have 3, 4, 5, 6 drunk driving violations, and they're still on the road. Okay.
Yeah.
I disagree with that. All right. And I've never been a victim of it, but, and in my youth, I've been guilty of it. Okay. And it's something I'm embarrassed of today. But I will tell you this. I think, you know how you get rid of drunk driving? You make a national law. First conviction, okay, very first time you blow over the limit and get convicted, property damage, injury, none of that matters. Minimum mandatory 15 years in prison.
Yeah.
You want to watch how many of these morons stop getting on the road drunk? You know how many lives something like that saves? Okay, so is it extreme? Yeah. But sometimes it takes extreme to accomplish good, and maybe that's a bad analogy.
I think it's a great analogy. I mean, it's interesting. So when I was raised, my parents were very strict on my brother and I. Right, we had very set schedules, set regimens. You know, we'd have to get up, we'd have to go to sports practice, and we'd come home. I mean, we wanted to play sports, so in order to play sports, we had to have good enough grades to be allowed to participate in sports. So then once our schedules got busier, it was wake up, train, go to class all day, go home, go to another sports practice, train. Sometimes we'd have 2, 3 sports practices a day, right? And we still had to keep our grades up, but there was the checks and balance system, right? If my grades drop, I lose what I want, which is to play sports, okay? It didn't matter. If the grades aren't there, I don't get to do what I want to do. At the same time, if I misbehave, guess what gets yanked? What I want to do, playing sports, right? My basketball would be confiscated. I wouldn't be allowed to practice with the team. If I don't practice with the team, then I don't get to play in the games. If I don't play in the games, then I sit on the bench. Like, it's a chain effect. So every decision as a youth that I had to make was, well, my ultimate goal is I want to play in the game. I want to start in the game. But if I make a bad decision, I'm going to lose all of that, right?
100%.
When I went out into the real world, and it was so interesting. I remember, and I called my dad once, and I love my father to death, but I said, Pops, you never prepared me for the real world. And he said, what do you mean you never prepared me for the real world? I said, it doesn't work the way that you raised me, right? Like, I'm trying to do everything right. I'm trying to work correctly. I'm being honest. I have my integrity. Like, I'm a good person. And I see all these people in this horse racing business who are lying and cheating, and they're on top. Like, what do I got to do? Like, you start asking yourself questions. Do I need to do that to get there? And John, you asked me a pointed question off the record, which I'll now put on the record. And you said, Mike, I had a feeling as a trainer, you looked like you might make it and make it big. But I had a feeling that you weren't willing to do what you needed to do to make it to the top, which is potentially blur the lines of right and wrong. And I said, yes,
That is
100%.
correct. We had that conversation, and
I was not willing to blur the lines of right and wrong to get to the top. And there's a lot of people who do, and then they get past that point, and then they clean up their act. But my point is, you've got to have harsh penalties. If people don't have to think twice about what they do, because they're not going to lose anything because of it, they're going to continuously violate. Now, granted, I understand why that should not fall on owners. And I understand why, but I also understand, one thing that my wife does is she regulates the Tennessee walking horse industry. Okay.
Right.
That is, so there are owners that get tied up in litigation. So when we saw these HISA rules come in, we understood potentially how they were built and why they were built that way, because there were things from the Tennessee walking horse industry that, an owner couldn't show his prize horse if it was sored before it, if it was found to be sored by a regulatory vet or what have you. So they were trying to say, look, we're going to take away your money. You can't compete if you're not going to do the right thing by your horse. It's the same thing. If you own a horse, and I understand, I am a racing manager, okay? I make a lot of decisions for owners. I advise owners. I help them be successful in the sport. They rely on me a lot of the times to give them the correct information. At the end of the day, you're the owner. It's your license. You own that animal. I don't own it. I'm going to do everything in my power to do the right thing for you. But there's a lot of people that don't have somebody like me, and they're relying on people. They don't know enough to know if they're in the wrong camp. I remember one day, and I'm not gonna share the name of this individual, but I was at Keeneland, and some owner, we were just chatting on the fence, and he was talking about his trainer and how his trainer was so honest, and he loved this trainer, and he was such a great guy, and gosh, he's just an amazing guy. I said, how much money have you spent with this guy? And he's like, 400,000 this year on yearlings and so on and so forth. But he tells me everything. He tells me just like it is. And I'm like, you have no clue who you're dealing with. And in 2 years, because I know that trainer's rotation, every 2 years, that trainer has to re-up. Okay. Every 2 years, he's got a cyclical thing. He only has a couple guys he keeps long-term that stick by him. But typically he's constantly having to reload, because at the 2-year mark, you realize he was full of shit the whole time. But you've gotta, I don't do anything in my life unless I know what I'm getting into and I know the ins and outs, right? I try and do my homework, and I get there's not a whole lot of information out there to help people learn about our sport, which is our fault, right? I have owners contact me, and this is the next step of Forza Bloodstock. Once I get everything else, organized, is I'd like to create educational documents that we have online that you can then download and read and learn about different aspects of the sport, so you understand the sport. Because I've had people ask me, hey, Mike, is there any information out there on X? And I go to Owner View, or I try and find something, and there's not a whole lot out there to teach these people. So the only way that they're able to learn is literally by taking somebody at their word in our sport, which I like a lot of people in our sport, but I don't trust a lot of people in our sport. It's a very short list of who I actually trust. So
remember on that other show what I said about that. My dad was the opposite of yours. He prepared me for only the real world, none of the other stuff. Okay. Yeah. I dropped out of school in the 8th grade, and my dad said, okay, you think it's going to be, hanging out in the schoolyard and doing whatever you want and partying all day? No. You're coming to the track with me every day where I could watch you, which was quite an education. I think more of an education than I would have got had I gone to high school.
Yeah.
which I did not go to. But you know, one of the things, like I told you on another show, and I don't mean this towards you personally, but it's just something that I've said, and there's two people in the world I trust. One's me, the other is not you.
Yeah.
You know? And it's true. You know, another thing he would always say, and we would laugh a lot at the racetrack about this when I had horses. You know, we would always say, those who know don't say, and those who say don't know.
Oh, for sure.
It's very true in our game. It's like people who bet on tips from trainers. Okay, you got to be an idiot. You know what I mean? You know, you could love your horse. Okay, love him. Love them.
You don't know how everybody else is going over there.
Exactly, right. You don't know who else is in there, and you don't even know if there's a fooler in there that nobody likes that's going to run better than them all. You know what I mean? So,
well, you were smart enough to realize when I was pulling one over on people. I mean, it was interesting. Somebody came to me when I came back to train my second time, which, okay, you know, if you look me up in California, I will tell you, it was a dumpster fire of a career. I was horrendous in California. I don't know what happened, but when I set up my stable in California, an owner came to me and said, there's a very interesting stat line on you on Brisnet. I said, what's the stat line? Like, I don't know. They said, if I bet on every single horse you ever ran, I would be in the black. Every horse you ever ran. They said, you won with so many long shots that it made up for the short price horse that you ran with. And I said, well, you know, I typically only took a horse over if I felt I was live. You know, there would be times where I knew, you know, I'd have fillies that I'd have from owner breeders who we were trying to increase earnings, increase their values as brood mares because I couldn't run them in claiming races. But, you know, there'd be times where I'd claim what happened. So I think when I ran second in the Miss Grilla with the maiden, I was 50-1. When I ran an allowance off of a claim, I took a horse for 35 out of Saratoga, won the allowance at Belmont, I was 35-1, right? I didn't walk them over unless I was live. And most other trainers in New York knew if I entered, I was live. You would know that I was probably live in a lot of spots. But again, if you're just somebody taking your trainer's tips and they don't know that, hey, look, this guy might win at 14%, but when he walks one over, they're ready. You're going to lose a lot of the times.
Absolutely. Right. No, 100%, you know, and, you know, what you're planning to do on Forza is something I've started to do on the handicapping side. I get so, you know, and I had written articles about this over the years, but I would still get asked, you know, how do you structure tickets? How do you handicap for pace and things like that? So I said, you know what? It's easier for me to just update something and to go back and find articles where I've, you know, talked about these things. So in the past couple of months, I've done 2 videos on Pass to Wire TV, and both have been very popular. One on how I structure tickets and how I've been successful playing and beating this game over the years, structuring tickets, and the other, how I handicap for pace, which is different than most other people do. And both of those videos are popular, and I intend to do more of those on the handicapping side, so people have a place to go when they, or I can refer them easily now to something. Hey, when they ask me those questions, there's a place, a source of good information, and you got to differentiate from your information because you don't want to take it from just anybody. You want to take it from somebody who's, you know, been there, done that, and had, you know, some level of success, not just somebody who's, you know, just putting out information saying, try this, try that, or, you know, this may or may not work.
Yeah. Well, and this is the most interesting thing in this sport as I go along. And I have a lot of respect for a lot of people. Okay. What a lot of people might think of those who are successful and those who really know the game, they're not usually the ones that are right out in front of your face, right? It's quiet. Like I met a gentleman yesterday at a layup farm, right? That I had heard his name a couple times. I was amazed with his knowledge and his horsemanship. And, you know, he's a guy that you'd look him up, you'd know no information on, right? So it is harder in this game. You know, I see it all the time, and it's very interesting that you bring up the picks. and I don't want to blast people, but I'll see people throwing picks out online. And I'm thinking, I get it. Maybe you're trying to show that you can pick a horse, or maybe you're trying to show to the public, but eventually if you start selling those picks, where are your qualifications on this, right? I mean, I can pick winners, but I will tell you what, I'm extremely good at identifying talent in racehorses. Like, that's one of my main gifts. Like, that's why as a trainer, I could say, this horse has this amount of talent, but what's holding it back is X, Y, and Z. It's the same thing why I can do it in claiming horses now and selecting race horses and yearlings and down the line. That's my greatest gift. People come to me and say, what do you think about this race? I'm like, I don't know. I can look at it and tell you and give you an idea, but I don't handicap to the point of what you would do, of what other people would do. So if I'm going out and saying, here's my picks, there's going to be times, I mean, I get hammered typically on betting trifectas, which I don't even know anything about gambling. I don't know how to structure a ticket. I don't know all the different things. I know two things: exacta box, trifecta box, win, play, show. Like, that's it.
Rule number one, never box.
Yeah.
You're already doing it wrong, okay?
Exactly.
Every box is automatically 5 losing bets plus the takeout. You're already behind the 8 ball. So
yeah,
continue.
But it's kind of, there are a lot of pockets in this industry of people who are extremely knowledgeable and extremely good at what they do. And you'd be surprised of who those people actually are.
Great. I'm going to give you a great example of that. And I agree 100%. And, maybe now people will say, yeah, because he's kind of gotten popular and on the radar, but this is somebody that you and I have spoken about for years. And I would say, I've known this guy as one of the best horsemen in the game for 15 years. And 8 years ago, you could have asked 10 people at the track and they wouldn't have known his name. Paulo Lobo.
Yeah. Phenomenal.
Okay. Phenomenal horseman, phenomenal trainer. I would give him any kind of horse that I was fortunate enough to own with extreme, complete confidence. And, only now people are noticing him. I mean, he won the Kentucky Oaks a long time ago, but
his first year training.
Right.
Paulo told me 5 horses.
Right. Long since forgotten. Okay. Yeah. Practically run out of the game, driving an Uber. A year later, 2 horses in the Breeders' Cup, maybe 3, but wasn't because he wasn't a phenomenal horseman and trainer. And now that he's gotten a little stock and gotten the right kind of people behind him, it's showing. But people that really know and understand the game know who those people are. There are people now, and again, I wouldn't call them out, but there are people now who I know are going to be great down the road. And there are people now that people are talking about, oh, watch this guy, watch that guy, that I know are not going to be great down the road. You know what I mean? And that you laugh at, people say, oh, this guy's the best young trainer around there. Okay, but we'll see in 10 years if they're still even in the business. And if they are, they won't be making their money winning graded stakes. They'll be making their money inflating the price of horses that they sell and all the other tricks that, padding the bill and all the other nonsense that some of these guys do. But here's an interesting question. And it's not for you, it's for the owners out there that completely disagree with us and that may have been hit by this rule and don't agree with it, don't understand it, don't like it. Here's my question to them, and I invite the feedback because discussion brings change and progress and understanding different perspectives. I think we've outlined our perspective on it. And we didn't discuss this before, the show, so I didn't know that we were going to agree or disagree or where our chips would fall. But my question for owners and anyone in the business that says this is a horrible rule, okay? Preface, we are an industry that has failed miserably to police itself despite making changes for the better over the past couple of years. And I mean better, B-E-T-T-E-R, not O-R. We never make changes that are better for the better with an O-R in the second better. That just doesn't happen. But it is what it is. Yeah, but no. The question is this, okay? If we failed miserably, And we know, okay, a regulatory agency that comes in with a monumental task of straightening this game out and policing it and guiding it and running it and leveling the playing field and protecting the horses and protecting the people involved, is their task is this. And they know that there are wealthy owners that are telling riders, ignore this rule, we will pay the fine. How do you as an owner who's not telling anybody you'll pay the fine, how do you as an owner suggest that HISA implements that rule or handles that rule if that is indeed a rule that they want to implement? Okay, and they do want to limit the number of strikes with the crop. Okay, so we're not discussing whether or not they should or shouldn't do that. They're doing that. Okay, this particular rule about penalizing the owner is what we're isolating here. How do you suggest as a stakeholder on any level in this game, or as a participant, that rule is written, policed, and enforced at the end of the day? That's my question, and I welcome the comments, because I don't know the answer. You know, if I knew the answer, I would put it out there. I don't know the answer, but I do think that if you're tasked with doing something and you do your due diligence and intel, which you should do, and you find out that there are wealthy owners saying to riders, don't worry about it, I'll foot the bill, I'll pay the fine, the purses are big, go win the race, don't worry about the rule, hit them as many times as you think you need to win. How do we stop that, if that's something we are targeting to stop?
No, I think it's a
That's
phenomenal
the question.
I think it's a phenomenal question.
So
I mean,
all the
I'm
people
not,
out there bashing HISA and bashing
Yeah.
the rule, what's
Look,
the solution? Okay,
it's
and the
very,
solution is not, well, don't implement that rule. They're implementing. They're limiting the strike. So we're past that. Okay, how do we stop owners from the owners that want to, not all owners, but the owners that want to say, hey, I'll foot the bill. Don't worry about it. Go win the race. How do we regulate that as a governing body? And that's my question to them. And that's what I look forward to seeing the answers. And I hope people put them in the comments. You and I always are pretty good about responding to all the comments.
Yeah.
You know, when people comment on social media, a lot of the times I don't see it. So if you're just going to comment on social media, there's a good chance I don't see it. You know, put it in the comments and you'll get a response. Like it, you may or may not like it, but if you put it in the comments, we'll either Michael or myself will 90% of the time respond.
well, and for sure. And I think it's interesting. I really, and this is something that Dominique and I are very strict about. We only work with people who we think are honest and have integrity in everything we do in business. Trainers that we work with, owners that we decide to work for, in every aspect. And I can tell you from the good people that we're around, they would want to make sure that the sport is fair, right? And I understand where it's not fair if an owner is telling a jock, hey, do what you got to do, I'll cover the expenses, don't worry about it. You've ruined it for every other owner who's trying to play the game the right way and who's just literally saying, I've given my horse to a good trainer who's going to do a good or great job. I've now put the horse in the right race. I've now walked over with what we think is the right jockey for the right horse. And then all of a sudden you get beat because somebody hits the horse 2 more times than it was allowed, and you're going to lose because of that. Yeah. I mean, I think, to be honest, that owner should lose the purse of the guy who won the race. You know, now whether that owner was honest or dishonest, you know, in that case, an owner saying, hey, hit him a couple more times and beat somebody who's played the game fairly from the beginning. So yeah, I mean, I look forward to seeing the comments on this. Obviously, as you can see, I'm very passionate about this stuff. I am very
passionate too, and I'm going to say something else that I wasn't going to say, but I'm going to say it because, like I said earlier, so many people misunderstand my take. So people are going to walk away and say, "Oh, he's in favor of the crop rule. And I didn't say that, okay? I necessarily don't think that limiting the number of strikes is a good thing to do. I think that that has always been in play, and the stewards have the authority and have the right to enforce excess or abusive use of the crop without any rule limiting the number of strikes, and they just never do it, okay? Unless it's an extreme case. They could have always done that, and we didn't need this rule. I'm in favor of educating people that these new whips and crops that we use have that Nerf type thing on the tip. Okay, it's thick, almost like a little, you know, the narrow end of like a wiffle ball bat. It doesn't hurt. I think we should be educating people with that. I think we should have samples of them when you walk through the doors at the racetrack, pictures of them up on ADWs, pictures of them on all the racing websites, where we educate people that, hey, doesn't matter if you hit a horse once or 100 times with this, it doesn't hurt. You're always going to get the backlash from some people. Well, if you encourage your horse too much, that's exhausted. There's a danger to that. That's beyond my expertise. That's something more for you, Dominique.
That's a very interesting point. That's a very interesting point.
That I'll admit is beyond my expertise as a bettor and a student.
That's
a horseman's thing. You know,
that's when horses, and I mean, to be honest, most of your injuries happen when these horses are rubber-legged and tired. Like that's when the majority of injuries happen. So
from that perspective, I stand down and say, you guys need to do what's best for the horse and to protect the horse when it comes to that. Okay. But as it stands now, my take is not, you know, what people are going to think it is, because I don't sympathize or agree with the owners that are crying over the way the rule was. Well, I do sympathize, but I don't necessarily agree with the way, you know, owners are taking that rule.
And here's a piece, and it's very interesting, and I think there's some lines in racing. I love horses, okay? And I wanted horses to run well, and I wanted horses to win if they were up to the task and capable of winning. There is another piece in our sport, and it shows up on horse racing Twitter. It shows up at the racetrack. It shows up at the sales, which is people's egos. Okay, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to piss off a lot of people. There is a big time in this sport where the person's ego is larger than the horse, right? They want to win that race versus having the horse win the race, right? The horse wins the race, and it's very interesting. And you see people bragging about all types of things. And I've said this to somebody before recently, and they said, that's a very interesting take. I remember, what was it, 6, 7? Well, it was when I was training at Belmont. And you'll walk around the racetrack and you'll walk around sales grounds, and you'll see people who think that they are God, right? They act like they're God. And do I have a good opinion of myself? Absolutely. I'm confident. I'm not arrogant. I know what my skill sets are. I know what I'm very good at, and I know what I suck at. Okay. I know that. I'm very honest with myself. But you'll see people who carry themselves like they're amazing. And I said, well, this is very interesting. Go walk outside the gates of Belmont. See how many people recognize you on the street about who you are, right? Most people won't. It's very interesting. I lived in in Arcadia, right? There's a Trader Joe's 2 blocks down the street from Santa Anita Park. Okay. I was buying tons of carrots and papaya because papaya was good for soothing horses' stomachs. So I'd use it as I'd blend papaya up and give it to horses in their feed, because sometimes it helps with ulcers, right? It's another preventative that I found worked, just blended papaya. Somebody said, why are you buying all this fruit? Like, do you like juicing, or do you like, smoothies? And I said, no, this is for my horses. They said, horses, where do you keep your horses? I said, at Santa Anita. They said, Santa Anita, what's Santa Anita? I said, it's 2 blocks that way. I said, it's one of the largest racetracks in the country, 2 blocks that way, right? Funniest thing too, I moved to Lexington, go to Trader Joe's, I'm shopping. And I'm talking to somebody, and they said, what do you do? I said, I work in the thoroughbred industry. They said, oh, that's nice. They said, I know there's horses around here. Where are they? I said, you're in Lexington. What people say is the horse capital of the world, quote unquote, which it's the horse breeding capital of the United States. I wouldn't say it's the horse capital of the world, but people even in this town don't even know. So here's my point. I understand in certain regards, everybody has goals of races they want to win. Okay. Of races that they'd like to see their horses win, or races they'd like to see their silks walk into the winner's circle, and then maybe eventually on a jockey outside Saratoga as you walk through the gates. Okay.
Absolutely.
That should never, ever come above the horse. Okay.
That's true.
And I'll put a very fine point. This is going to really upset a lot of people. That's fine. Blast me on social media. One of the races that sticks out in my mind that I think it was massive abuse of the whip was when Rachel Alexandra won the Woodward Stakes at Saratoga. If you watch how many times Calvin Burrell hit that poor 3-year-old filly down the stretch to get her nose up to win that race, and you look at what happened afterwards to that filly, she never ran again.
She was never the same. Yeah, she was never the same. And I'll tell you, you go back, and I have a friend of mine that I've gone to the racetrack with since we were kids, okay, and we're still like brothers from another today. And we joke about a certain race and rider and say with today's rules, this horse probably wouldn't have won. Watch Temperance Hill win the Belmont Stakes. I never counted how many times Eddie Maple, you know, hit him coming down the lane, but it was well over any crop rule that we have today in any jurisdiction whatsoever. He hit him, and from the 3/16 pole home, he might have hit him 20, 30 times. I mean, seriously, he just really did, and the horse got up. So, you know, that's a fine line. And again, that's one I stand down on, you know, the number of strikes when it gets to the point of, you know, over encouraging a horse to overextend themselves. Okay, that's not my wheelhouse. And I do realize that that's something that can be. See, everybody thinks the issue is, oh, well, we just want to appease Peter and we're bowing down to Peter and they don't hurt. Like I said, you know, the crop doesn't hurt, so you can hit them 1,000 times. I get that part of it, and there's some truth to that maybe in trying to appease Peter. But there is that other issue there that I brought up, and that you are more versed than I, and that's over encouraging a horse to do more than they got. You know what I mean? And it's different if you or I are doing something athletic. Okay, yeah. If I'm running 20 miles and I say, you know what, today I'm going to run 25. And I'm 23 miles in and I'm like, you know what? I ain't going to make it. You know what I mean? I might have a heart attack. I might drop dead. I'm dehydrated. I'm fatigued. I just ain't going to, I could stop. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's nobody prodding me saying, keep going, keep going. It's my decision based on my knowledge of my conditioning. Okay. Yeah. Horse might know the same thing, but doesn't have that luxury of saying, you know what? That's enough. They could ease, but does a horse really ease if a guy's keep flagging him and hitting him? So I get that that's the flip side of the crop rule. That's the elephant in the room that nobody talks about. You know, everybody talks about appeasing PETA, appeasing the public and limiting the number of strikes for that reason. There's another reason. Okay?
No, it's a huge reason.
You know, and that's over encouraging a horse, you know. Now, granted, if the safety of a race rider, a jockey, or a horse is in play, then I think a rider should have the discretionary, the discretion to use
safety,
the crop
for safety
above that for safety reasons. And I think the rule is written that they do. I'm not sure, but if it's not, it certainly should be. And the stewards need to be more well-versed in crop use, okay?
Right.
Honestly. They need to have the jurisdiction to say, hey, you know what? We're not going to limit, but we can tell, we're trained, we know when you're abusing, overusing, over-encouraging a horse and crossing that line. And I think if you can't be trained to do that objectively as a steward, you probably shouldn't be a steward. And the way we see some of these decisions come down over the past couple of years, there are probably a lot of stewards in that category. But you know, that's a whole nother issue.
Well, here's an interesting thing, and something where our sport doesn't have, yes, we have a lot of medication rules, right? I mean, from the trainer side, there's a ton of medication rules. But if you think of another sport like basketball is what I love to do when I'm not doing horse racing. I'll be in the gym lifting weights, or I'll be playing basketball. Like, that's my outlet. Okay. But in basketball, you pick up the ball, you got 3 steps. Otherwise, you travel. Okay.
Right.
You can't pick up the ball and then dribble it again. That's called double dribbling. You've got rules. Now, within those rules, you can become creative as long as you play by the rules. And to be honest, I don't have an issue with limiting crop use. Okay. I do think, yes, for safety purposes, and this is coming from a guy who's trained horses. And I actually had a conversation with my wife last night because I had some nasty horses who pulled some mean things on the racetrack, right? And it wasn't because they were injured or they were sore or anything else. Horses have a very interesting mentality, and certain horses like to do this. They want to see what they can get away with. They're like kids, okay? Well, if I am galloping and I hit the brakes and I get the rider off, well, let me try that again, right? And let me try that again. And let me see how many times I can get away with this, right? So there are horses in certain situations where same thing as you train your dog, right? If you train your dog with solely positive reinforcement, which I think is a very good training tool, your dog is also going to learn that it's never going to be, it can do whatever it wants as long as it's rewarded for it. And sometimes there's situations where positive reinforcement works in certain environments. When you have a human on the back of a horse, and a horse hits the brakes or wheels or rears up or does all of these things, you have to also be able to teach that animal. So for safety purposes, I 100% agree that you do need to have the ability, these are 1,200 pound animals, right? There's only so much you can do with your hands and feet. So for corrective purposes to teach, because horses, it's the same thing. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. They are herd animals. There's a herd dynamic in everything that happens with these racehorses. In a race and in a training environment, they're trying to test where they stand in the herd structure, okay? So as you come along, you have to teach these horses as they go. It's interesting because I also talked, when I worked for Richard Mandela, he is a phenomenal horseman, an amazing individual. And he told me, Mike, we have to teach these colts how to behave. Colts, when you start working with colts, they're mouthy. They want to bite. They want to throw a foot. They want to try and kick you. They want to do all sorts of things because they're just colts. They're teenagers. They're playful. They're pushy, right? But you have to teach them manners. And Mandela was very much, I need to teach these boys manners because there's a really good chance that some of them are going to end up as stallions. And those that do, it then becomes dangerous because the nipping turns into biting, which then turns into savaging, okay? So you have to nip things in the bud early. So for safety purposes, you have to be able to teach these horses to school them a little bit. But my point is, when you say 8, you get 8 hits in a race. Now the jock has to figure out, well, you know what? This horse does stop on me at the 8th pole once he hits the lead, right? Let me time it a little bit different. Let me get creative within those rules to get the best out of this horse that I can get under the current guidelines.
Right.
That's how I look at it.
No,
right?
I get it. And what people I think also have to understand is, if you decide to play the game, you play according to the rules. Okay. Yeah. There are rules in betting that I don't agree with. Like, I like to bet pick 4s, 5s, and 6s. Okay. When a horse scratches that you used on your ticket, they automatically put that wager onto the favorite. Okay. I hate that rule. Okay. I might not want the favorite. I might already have the favorite. I want an alternate option. There's a million different ways I'd rather get my money back in some cases, a complete refund. There are a million things I prefer, but unfortunately the rule is if your horse scratches after you make the bet or the sequence begins, you get the favorite. I know that's the rule. I play knowing that's the rule. So these are the rules. You play knowing the rules. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't agree with them all, but I choose to play the game. So if you play, you gotta play by the rules. And getting back to mean horses, I think we can wrap up with this. Eddie Arcaro is one of my favorite riders of all time. And I remember in an interview with him once, somebody asked him about, the best horses he ever rode. And he didn't mention Citation right away. And they were like, well, what about Citation? He goes, yeah, well, he was great, but he and I, we had our differences. So I'm not going to give him the courtesy of mentioning him. And like, what are you talking about? He goes, what am I talking about? I go, horse tried to kill me every time I was on his back.
Yeah.
He was just a mean horse. He went on then to talk a little bit about that, how mean he was and how in the gate he would try and slam him and how he would try and kick him and how he would try and bite him and how if he turned his back on him, he might not be there giving the interview. So horses can be a little ornery and tough and mean. And Citation, according to Eddie Arcaro in that interview, never really learned those manners. So you can try and teach them all day long, but they're 1,200 pounds. You're 110 pounds sitting on their back.
Well, and here's the thing, and it goes hand in hand. And this is something that people don't always understand until they see it happen in a race, because not everybody's on the backside, right? Who was it last year he tried to savage Alpine? Who was that horse?
Oh, Firenze, was it Firenze?
Yeah, Firenze Fire,
Firenze
right?
Fire?
Leaned over. So we have bred these horses to be competitive. That is what they've been bred for. They've been bred to race. Some people look at speed. Some people look, and you and I have talked about the mental components of horse racing.
Right.
Competitiveness is the main component. Competitiveness and aggression goes hand in hand. Okay. Your top athletes in sports don't just go out there and say, I love playing basketball. I hope I win. They want to win, and they will dunk on you. They will, they'll block your shot. They'll make you feel terrible as your opponent because they want to win. That's
right.
Aggression. People don't see it as that, but that is a form of aggression. It's the same thing with these horses. So some of it comes down to when you're working with them in a racing environment. It's just part of their nature. You don't abuse them. You don't hurt them. But you have to understand there's fine lines in this, because they could really hurt somebody in some environments, especially on the racetrack. And so there does need to be the help for jocks to have what they need to have for safety purposes.
All right. I know you like to play basketball, and I'm a little too old to play at this stage of the game, but I used to play when I was young. And when I used to play, one of my things, my little quirks, because I was very competitive as well, when I would play, okay, whoever I was guarding or whoever I was matched up against, my strategy always was early in the game. Okay, a lot of people like to score, do a great layup, hit a nice, shot from the top of the key or the corner or something like that. Mine was defensive. What I used to love to do, okay, and it would just set the tone, and I felt like it would give me a psychological edge over that guy, is I would try and stuff them on one of their early shots. Just a complete stuff, just not a tip, a block, just a stuff, you know what I mean? And that, when I was able to do it, I felt gave me a tremendous edge and just changed the whole tone of that matchup for the rest of the game.
Yeah, like a hard foul, like the Detroit Pistons.
Right.
You're not
And
going to
when I was able to pull it off, and I wasn't the best player, so I couldn't always pull it off. But when I did, it absolutely created an edge, in my opinion, at least psychological. Hey, I think this was a great show. I think it will spur some thought from people that are fortunate enough to watch it. Yeah, well, it goes with the territory. So, but if you've got an opinion, put it in the comments. One of us will get back to you. Maybe both of us will get back to you. It's just as easy to do that as to, spout it on social media, where we may or may not see it or may not answer, because sometimes it just, gets overwhelming. But, if you put something in the comments and think enough to do that, one of us will surely respond. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I think it's an interesting subject, and I hope we brought some at least different perspectives for people to think about, because, the exchange of ideas and different points of view, I think, are an important element of progress, in my opinion.
Agreed. I think we're all trying to play the game. We're all trying to play it fairly. And, for me personally, and a lot of the people I work with, we all want to do what's in the best interest of the horse and everybody that's around them, and make it fair, because the fairer we make this sport, the better we make it for horses, the more participation we'll have, the more fans will gather as an industry, and the better the sport will become overall. So
100%. Well said. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and ciao for now.
see ya.
Tracking trips with Pick 6 King John Stettin. It's one of the best tools in horse racing for any level of player. It's your second set of eyes, spotting troubled trips, betting angles, track trends, horses to watch and favorites to fade, 10 figs, ticket structure, and more. At Tracking Trips, you're a friend with benefits. Not a member? You must hate winning money. Join Tracking Trips now. Visit pastthewire.com and we'll see you in the winner's circle. Remember, nobody does it
With
better.
some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Nobody does it better.